Hello, welcome to Sacerdotus Hangouts. Today we remember a great American who opened the door to many minorities in this country who were not allowed to advance in society due to race or ethnicity. Martin Luther King Jr., born Michael King Jr. on January 15, 1929, was a Baptist minister and social activist who had the courage to stand up to the powers that be at the time. His father was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. While on a trip to Germany, his father was inspired by the Catholic Augustinian priest and father of the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther. His inspiration brought him to change his own name to Martin Luther King Sr., as well as that of his son, Martin Luther King Jr. And this is how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. got his name. As a young child and into his adolescence, Dr. King was a gifted student. So gifted, in fact, that he was allowed to begin college at age 15 at Morehouse College in 1944. At first, Dr. King did not want to follow in the pattern of his male relatives, who had a tendency of becoming ministers or pastors. However, the president of Morehouse, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who was also a theologian, changed his mind. Dr. King was then ordained even before completing college with a sociology degree. He would go on to earn a divinity degree, or MDiv, from Pennsylvania Crozer Theological Seminary and a PhD in 1955 from Boston University. Dr. King's great leadership would take him to become a great and probably the greatest civil rights leader in American history. As civil rights leader, he led many peaceful marches and fought with words against prejudice, segregation, and racism. And I emphasize words because he was a pacifist. He did not use violence to get his opinions across. And today we know of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, which attempt to communicate ideas or frustrations regarding Islam and religion, but they do it in an offensive way. Dr. King had no need of that. He had no need to draw cartoons mocking white people or call them crackers or wiggers or whatever term out there that exists that's derogatory. He had no need for that. He led peaceful marches and used his words as weapons. His words, peaceful words. Because of this, he was arrested 30 times, possibly more. That the king would gather thousands upon thousands in marches meant to draw attention of other Americans and the global audience regarding segregation in America, which is an embarrassment for America. It's just unbelievable to think that decades ago, people were separated. African Americans couldn't go to certain schools. There were two different sets of drinking water fountains to drink from, one for the so-called colored people and one for the white people, for the as if white is not a color. And this is just a strange how people thought back in the days, how they saw themselves and others. And these things were going on, and it's a shameful period in American history, along with the slave trade and the massacre of many Native Americans and the Columbian exchange, I will add as well. It's just horrible, the things that our nation allowed to occur. And of course, today's tragedy is abortion and this distortion of marriage, as we now know that the Supreme Court is going to make a decision on. Anyhow, Dr. King's famous words, and the words probably everybody in the world should know, is from the I Have a Dream speech. In this speech, he speaks about a future with unity, equality, peace, and harmony among all Americans. And when I say equality, I don't mean this nonsense that we see today regarding gender equality and not with women's rights, don't get me wrong, but gender orientation, I should say, sexual orientation equality. This whole idea that who cares if people of the same gender marry or someone changes their gender, they should be allowed to go to the bathroom of their choice. As we see in California, where a boy could say that he's really a girl and go into the girl's bathroom. And this is perfectly legal. That's not the equality that I'm referring to with Dr. King. Dr. King was referring to the equality of people, races, ethnicities. Some of that dream has been realized today, but we still have a long way to go. Today, many atheists and humanists, even feminists, claim to fight for social justice. However, they were absent during the time of Dr. King. To my knowledge, there was no counterpart to Dr. King, no atheist out there. There was no Richard Dawkins type guy, no Lawrence Krauss type of dude out there speaking for the minorities and against segregation, while at the same time representing atheism or humanist views. There was none at all. Now, there's different reasons for that. That doesn't mean they weren't present. I'm sure in the marches there were atheists present and humanists, but there's different factors. At the time, atheism wasn't really that popular. Even today, some atheists can get extremely criticized for saying certain things, and people protest whenever they show up suing schools and public places for having a nativity scene. And we see that when Madeline O'Hare, who was the founder of the American movement, or the vocal leader of the atheist American movement in the United States. So there's different factors that they weren't present, or at least in a leadership role, visible, like Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and people like that. And that's one of the reasons probably they were scared to. I mean, who in their right mind is going to stand up and say, yeah, I'm for segregation and so forth, but let's leave God out of it. Let's not mention Christ. There was going to be a lot of ramifications for that, a lot of repercussions for that, for even thinking that way. So that's probably one of the reasons why they weren't that very vocal out there, the atheists and humanists. And being a strong public leader, Dr. King was not immune to controversy. The FBI kept an eye on him, not only because of his massive marches, but because of alleged ties to communist groups. As suspicions surrounded him, so did allegations of adultery. King was rumored to have an addiction to women, particularly Caucasian or white ones. He was also accused in a book of using his denomination's donations to pay for these prostitutes and other vices. It didn't happen overnight, but eventually it would disappear, segregation, and all these things that were going on. Before, there were separate water fountains, separate schools for whites and blacks. Blacks even had to sit in the back of the bus or give up their seat to white people. Today, all that is gone, pretty much. Many African Americans have risen the ladder of success, and of course, we saw in 2008 the first African American president elected, Barack Obama. Credit must also be given to Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on a bus where Caucasians had the right to sit in the front and African Americans did not. This was what brought Dr. King publicity when he became the spokesman for the Montgomery bus boycott. He was relatively unknown prior to this role. In 1964, he would be the youngest at the time to receive the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 35. Obviously, the record was broken recently with last year with Malala, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. And I believe she's 17 or 18 now. In 2011, a large memorial was opened in Washington, D.C. in honor of Dr. King. Now he will be forever remembered as a great American and the only African American to be memorialized via stone, along with Presidents Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Jefferson. Dr. King is the only American to have his birthday celebrated as a federal holiday, alongside our first president, George Washington. Now, some people would say or will ask, what about Columbus? Don't we celebrate Columbus' birthday in October? Well, yes, that's true. We do celebrate Columbus' birthday in October, and it is a federal holiday, but there's a problem. When Columbus was born and when he came here, there was no America, so he wasn't American. Dr. King was. He was born in America. Though not a Catholic, Dr. King was instrumental in bringing civil rights to African Americans and other minorities who reside in the United States of America. He was not a perfect man. Nevertheless, his personal weaknesses cannot rob him of the great work he did in the name of justice, unity, and equality for all. Today, there are still problems with race in America. There seems to be a discrepancy with the number of minorities who graduate from school and have successful jobs when compared to the majority. The recent killings of young African Americans, such as Michael Brown, by Caucasian police have been reminding America of the problem of racial profiling. And we see this a lot. And studies show that, according to the Justice Department, that relatively more black drivers, 12.8%, than white, 9.8%, and Hispanic, 10.4%, of drivers were pulled over during a traffic stop. And I've seen this happen a lot of times. Police see a black man, he has a nice car, and they pull him over. They ask him for his documents, registration, and many times they frisk him because for some reason a black person can't drive a nice car. And this happens a lot, unfortunately. This is due to racial profiling. Since crimes tend to be committed a lot by minorities, unfortunately, black people, then I guess they're all criminals, right? Well, that seems to be the mentality of the people in law enforcement today and city officials. And that has to change. And that's why I'm glad that stop and frisk in New York was taken away, was knocked down. It's unconstitutional. And it's also immoral. And speaking of stop and frisk, according to the NYCLU, statistics dating from 2002, where over 5 million people were surveyed or studied in the statistics, they found that 9 out of 10 stop and frisk New Yorkers have been completely innocent. So that's roughly 90% of the people that were stopped were innocent. They had no weapons. They had no contraband. They had nothing. Now, in the majority of these cases, the majority of the people stopped were blacks. In 2003, 54% were stopped, 31% Latino were stopped, 54 black, and only 12% white. And the majority that were stopped were youth, 14 to 24 years of age. In 2004, 55% were black, 32 Latino, 10% white. In 2005, 54% black, 32 Latino, 11% white. In 2006, 53% black, 29 Latino, 11 white. In 2007, 54% black, 31% Latino, and 12% white. 2008, 53 black, 32 Latino, and 11 white. And the statistics continue all throughout the same until last year, 2014. 54% black, 27% Latino, and 12% white. They were stopped and frisked. You see the common denominator there? The majority were black people, black young men who were being stopped by police under suspicion that they are up to no good. There's a video on YouTube, I believe, that I don't know if it's a prank or a study that somebody did, where there's a car and there's two guys, a black guy and a white guy, and they pretend to lock themselves out of the car. The white guy comes, he gets a wire hanger and he unwinds it, turns it into a stick, and sticks it through the window of the side of the door to try to unlock the car. And while he's doing this, people are walking by and they look at him and nobody says anything. They just look at him, they see him fidgeting with the wire hanger trying to unlock the car. And nobody says a word. Then they try it again, but this time with a black man. So the black guy comes and he does exactly the same thing the white guy was doing before with a wire hanger, and he's trying to open the door. Then you see all of these people, mostly white people, looking at the black man in horror. One of them even pulls out a cell phone and calls the police. And the police comes and they arrest the black guy. Whereas before with the white guy, they just saw him as doing something normal to them. And we could see the prejudice there, the discrepancy there, where the white guy is simply unlocking the car. He's not doing nothing bad. The black guy comes and he's doing exactly the same thing, but there's a different interpretation to that action. He's stealing the car. He's a thief. Time to call the cops. So that's a big problem in America that we have today that has to be addressed. And that's why we see all these people marching in the streets. And you see the frustration against cops and so forth. Again, not all cops do this. They had to listen to the orders from their superiors, of course. But overall, there's that prejudice against minorities, in particular African American males. So we as Americans have to work on that. Otherwise, Dr. King's dream turned into a nightmare. Or it was just a dream. It can never happen in reality. Moreover, some African Americans in the entertainment business seem to propagate the view that African Americans must carry the urban ghetto social script in order to be respected in their communities as quote unquote real black people. So we see today different entertainment people in the African American community still use words such as nigga or claim that they had to adopt the urban ghetto social script in order to be so-called real black people. And it seems that they forget these words have a horrible reality attached to them. Many African Americans were beaten up using that word. Many of them were poured tarred upon, hot tar, and thrown feathers with while the word was being yelled at them. Many of them were hung on nooses while this word was being yelled at them. Many of them were told to get off the bus, move to the back, while being called that word. Yet today's generation doesn't really care. The reality of how horrible the negativity, the negative history that word holds. It seems the dream has been forgotten. I, for one, still have hope that we will see Dr. King's dream realized into full completion and with sincerity. And I'm going to backtrack a bit because I believe there was some microphone trouble according to some messages I'm receiving. So I'm going to backtrack a bit. It seems that I was talking to myself for a while as the microphone was not picking me up. So I will backtrack again regarding Dr. King, a little bit of his history. He was a gifted student. He began college at age 15, Morehouse College in 1944. At first, he didn't want to be a minister like his father and grandfather and so forth, but the president of Morehouse College, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, convinced him to be a minister, pastor. King was ordained before finishing his college degree, which was in sociology. He would go on and earn an MDiv or Master Divinity degree from Pennsylvania Crozier Theological Seminary, and then a PhD in 1955 from Boston University. And these skills will allow him to become the great leader that he became to be, and the civil rights leader, in fact. As a civil rights leader, he led many peaceful marches and fought with words against prejudice, segregation, and racism. And I stress the word words because today we have this controversy with Charlie Hebdo, where people say, "Oh, it's a right. We have a right to defend people, to offend people, to harass people, to mock people's beliefs, and so forth." Dr. King had no need for that. Dr. King didn't enjoy any cartoons making fun of white people. He didn't call them crackers. He did none of that. He had no need to. He used the power of his intellect, his morals, and his word to end segregation and bring more respect to the African American community and all other communities, also Latino, Asian, or the other minorities out there. He was arrested over 30 times. He gathered thousands in marches and drew attention to Americans and the global family of the horrors that were going on in America, the horror called segregation. And just this is just shameful that in America we had separate schools where minorities went to one school and white people went to another. They couldn't drink from the same fountain. There was special fountains for each group, one for so-called colored and one for whites. They couldn't play with each other. They couldn't coexist in the same neighborhood. Even in the army, they were separated. They couldn't coexist, which is really ridiculous because if you read the history of the Puerto Rican soldiers at the time, there's a specific famous one called the Buccaneers. It's very interesting with them because Puerto Ricans, they come in different colors. You could find a Puerto Rican that looks whiter than Bill Clinton. You could see a Puerto Rican that's blacker than Michael Jackson. Oh, not Michael Jackson, but Stevie Wonder. You could find a Puerto Rican that looks Asian like Jackie Chan, or can look Arab like one of these Saudi Arabian people. They all come in different shades and colors. And in the army, the Puerto Ricans that look white or the Cubans that look white with fine hair and like eyes, they will put with the other non-Hispanic Caucasian, not non-Hispanic whites. Where the black looking Hispanics, Puerto Rican Cubans, they will put with the blacks, with the African Americans. That just goes to show you the nonsense that was going on at the time. Even though these people were Hispanic and they just happened to be a different skin color, they were still Puerto Rican or Cuban. They were separated based on their color. So this is a shameful thing that we have in American history. So Dr. King brought attention to all of that. His famous words are recorded in the I Have a Dream speech, and it's a very powerful speech, which speaks about the future with unity, equality, peace, harmony among all Americans. And what I mean by equality is not this thing going on today with um, same gender equality and all of that. Dr. King didn't even think of that. Yet he didn't have that in mind. What he thought of equality was a black man is equal to a white man. That's what he had in mind. I know there's some LGBT people out there that want to claim Dr. King for themselves. If he were alive today, he would be against what's going on today. He was a minister. He was a Christian minister. You can't conflate the civil rights movement with this LGBT movement today. So we have to be careful with that. And I personally find it offensive when they try to compare the civil rights movement with their movement. It's very offensive. And a lot of African Americans feel the same way. They get up in arms when they see that comparison. Some of the dream that Dr. King had has been realized, but we still have a long way to go. Today, many atheists and humanists claim to fight for social justice. However, they were absent during the time of Dr. King. Now, what I mean by that is that there was no atheist or humanist counterpart. There wasn't an atheist, humanist Dr. King out there talking, speaking on civil rights and so forth. There was no Madeline O'Hare type figure. No Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or Lawrence Krauss type of dude out there fighting for civil rights of minorities, African Americans. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't atheists in the crowd. I'm sure they probably were. I'm sure there probably were humanists in the crowd. Why they weren't out there really public? Oh, there's different reasons. I mean, one, they were probably scared to. I mean, atheism at the time, it would be suicidal to come out as an atheist back in those days. Religion still had a good hold on society, churches, and so forth. And the relativistic ideas we have today were pretty much non-existent back then. So it will be suicidal for an atheist to say, hey, I'm an atheist, with the A and the atom symbol on their shirt. It will be suicidal because you will get ridiculed. You'll probably get beaten up. Who knows? Even today, when atheists speak out, they sometimes get harassed by Christians, namely fundamentalist Christians who see them as these heathens or evil people. And atheists, obviously, a lot of people don't really like them because they can be too aggressive, offensive, like we see with Charlie Hebdo. And they often become the party pooper of society, trying to remove nativity scenes and Christmas carols and all these different fun celebrations. They try to remove them. So a lot of people don't really like that. And, and that's today in the 21st century. Imagine decades ago. So that's probably one of the reasons why we don't see or hear of these figures, these atheist humanist figures out there like Dr. King, Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks speaking out. They were probably afraid to. They didn't want to be identified as quote unquote a heathen. Now, again, that doesn't mean they probably weren't present there. I'm sure they probably were. They were probably present. They were probably hidden in the crowds. Um, Maybe they were pretending to pray along with Dr. King or say amen. We don't really know, but I believe they probably were present. Humanists and atheists were probably present in the marches and in the movement, but not in a leadership capacity or public capacity. Now, Dr. King, since he was a strong leader, it didn't mean that he was immune to everything. There was a lot of controversy with him. The FBI kept a watch on him, not only because of the big crowds that he gathered, but because they claim he had ties to communist groups. And around this time, America was very paranoid with Cuba and Russia. The Cold War was still going on, and everybody that seemed different was automatically a communist. As these suspicions surrounded him, so did the allegations of adultery. King is rumored to have had an addiction to women, particularly Caucasian and white ones. He was also accused in a book of using his denomination's donations to pay for prostitutes and other vices. And probably one of the most big controversies was that in 1980, in the 1980s and 90s, a study of his dissertation entitled A Comparison of the Conception of God in the Thinking of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Willman found that Dr. King had plagiarized someone else's work. What? You're kidding? Yes, they found that Dr. King plagiarized his dissertation. Now, for those of you listening who don't know what the heck a dissertation is, it's pretty much a large paper, pretty much a book that PhD candidates have to present to the body of academics of their department in order to graduate with a doctoral degree. And this dissertation, this paper, you have to defend it against them. You have to stand before the committee, the department, and so forth, and present your thesis to them and defend it when they interrogate you. And if you do a good job, if you defend your research, you show it's not BS, you show that it's solid, strong, defendable, valid, well presented, then the chair comes to you and says, "Congratulations, doctor, and you have just earned your PhD in whatever it is you studied." Now, this sounds like a Debbie Downer type of thing. Oh, how can Dr. King cheat? He's a cheater. How can he do that? Well, there's different possible reasons why Dr. King plagiarized his work. One, due to the hostile environment against minorities at the time participating in higher education, and we see that even today. Perhaps he felt compelled to plagiarize in order to have his work looked over and judged fairly. And today, in a lot of colleges, we see minorities judged differently, looked over differently. If a class of mostly minority gets a lot of grades or good grades, the the powers that be raise their eyebrow. And I've seen this and I've heard of this even in New York City, where different departments find it suspect to have minority colleges or colleges that have a lot of minorities, if they see the institution is awarding too many degrees, or the time of graduation is too perfect, or the grades are too good, then they have an audit. They check to see if this is really true. Whereas with colleges and university where mostly the people that attend are Caucasian, nobody double checks it. And we see a lot of this and jokes against George Bush, and he graduated Harvard, I believe, or Yale, I think. And a lot of people think of Bush as a imbecile. How could this guy graduate from Yale University? Yet nobody bothered to look. I'm not saying that he is, but I'm just saying this is the joke out there. Just using it as an analogy. So that could have been one of the reasons why he plagiarized. He knew he was being looked on constantly as being black and probably not capable of doing PhD level work. So he had to present his case the best he could in order to be judged fairly. There are even studies out there that claim that minorities are not as intelligent as Caucasian people. Yeah, there are studies out there. And immediately people believe this. I mean, they don't even bother to check. Then maybe because the majority has more people, maybe the number is going to be higher. That's what we call the power of numbers, where the N, or the capital N or small n, can alter the power of the effect that you're looking for in the study. And if you know or study statistics or the sciences where they measure certain things. So we have to be careful with statistics and these research papers and whatnot when they offer all these different numbers. For example, or atheists are smarter than theists. You have to really be careful with that. Sometimes the media works it that way in order to get readers, in order to get how do you call it? In order to get ratings. You have to look at the numbers, especially the N. The N changes a lot how the result is presented. Then there's also the possibility that maybe he was not good at structuring a paper, since most of the plagiarism discovered was based on lack of citation or attribution, which is common even among students today who forget to add quotation and references. But this is another thing that probably happened. Maybe he wasn't good at structuring a paper. Maybe he forgot to put quotations or to cite. It happens all the time. I remember my own college days, friends of mine who many times knew the material more than I did. We were given our draft papers to the professor, and I will get mine back, and I will have like a B minus or B plus, and they will have a D or F. And we would be like, "What? How did you get that grade?" And then we would look through it, and we see that they forgot quotations, they forgot to cite. Many times they forgot to add the bibliography or the reference page, or they even made a mistake in setting up the reference page. And that's when it becomes tricky because each department, each field has a different way of doing it. One calls for the MLA version, another one calls for APA version, and all these different philosophy version. And there's all different kinds of ways to write papers. So if you study different things like I have, then you obviously will get confused on trying to figure out which paper style to use and how to properly structure it. This is why many colleges have writing centers where students go and they give their paper to pretty much a group that's there, and they overlook it. Not just one person, but several people look through the same paper. Because sometimes one person might read a paper and they say, "Oh, it's fine." But then you pass it along to 3 or 4 or 5 more people, and they could find 10 or 20 mistakes on it. And the same thing happens with professors. I know professors, I'm not mentioning any names, but I know professors who they hand their work to other professors, especially in the English department, to overlook their work, to make sure they spell things right, they cite it correctly, they use the correct format, correct grammar, correct tense, all the different complexities of the English language. And God forbid it's an Italian paper because Italian grammar is even worse than English. Spanish is not so hard. I mean, you just get confused with the accents sometimes, but Italian is really tough when it comes to grammar. And professors have to do a lot of writing, depending on their level of or their rank. If a professor's a full professor, he or she has to do research. Many people don't know this. They think that a professor just goes and teaches classes and then goes home, like a regular teacher from elementary, junior, or high school. No, a full professor or an associate professor, they have to do research in their area of expertise. They have to constantly do research. They have to be up to date with the latest research out there in their field. They have to be open to studying new things. They have to keep their university up to par in the academic world. And in order to do this, they have to be immaculate in their writing. And of course, they're human, just like students, and they make mistakes. So they often check each other's work to make sure their research is up to par with the standards of academia. And these papers, of course, get published, which other people use to cite from. So their work has to be good, it has to be excellent in order to be out there so it could be cited by other faculty from all over the world or other students who find it on their university libraries. Now, luckily, officials decided not to revoke Dr. King's doctorate posthumously. For one, he was dead. I mean, what's the point of taking away a dead guy's degree? And also, doing so will not make sense because it might bring charges against the college for trying to bring down an American icon. As we saw with Joe Paterno, who was this big college football guy coach. He was on the top of his game in regards to being a coach. And his assistant, Jerry Sandusky, comes and accusations come out that he abused young boys, molested, had sex with young boys, had child porn and whatnot. And then as the investigation goes along, we see that Joe Paterno knew about this and never truly reported it to the officials. And when something did go to the official, they didn't do anything, which sounds similar to what happened with the Catholic Church. Reports are made, and some bishops said, okay, we would just send him to therapy and he'll be fine, instead of reporting it to the police. And that's a dumb thing to do. You see a crime, report it. You know of a crime, report it. Somebody tells you they were abused or molested or whatever, or threatened, report it to the police. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't trust that the priest, pastor, bishop, professor, principal is going to do anything about it. Report it to the police. To the district attorney, you have to. It's not your job to know whether it's truthful or not. It's not your job. You're not going to get in trouble for filing a report if it turns out to be false. You're not going to get in trouble for that. Just tell the police, report it. So this guy, Joe Paterno, didn't do that. And I believe he was forced to resign or he was fired. And they took away all of his wins, his record, his prestigious record on college football from Penn State. They took it away, and They even took away a statue they built in his honor, a big bronze statue. They removed it, and he fell from up there in the sports college world throne. He eventually died of cancer. And what happened? They restored his record a couple of days ago. And the college, of course, is being scrutinized for that, for taking away his record and all that stuff. So imagine if Boston College took away Dr. King's doctoral degree. Just say that will happen to them. It will bring them into a negative light. And I don't think they want that. And on the topic of professors and colleges, ironically, one of his professors at the seminary gave Dr. King a C for public speaking class. Can you imagine that? Dr. King, the Dr. King, the guy who said, "I have a dream," who spoke so eloquently and without missing a beat. His professor, who was teaching him how to speak publicly in front of people, gave him a C for that. It's just mind-boggling. I remember taking public speaking class. I think it was the code was CMS or something like that. And the class pretty much constituted of buying a book, of course. We had to support the business of college by buying textbooks. And we had to read the textbook, and then we had to learn how to speak in front of the class at different time intervals, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and whatnot, to get used a few for timing and speaking within certain time limits. We had to work on demeanor, how to stand in front of people, eye contact, look at people left and right once in a while, not stare at the paper all the time, not fidget with your hands, not move your hands all over the place like an Italian, standing up straight, not slouching, all these different things we had to work on. And Dr. King, his professor, gave him a C for public speaking. It's just unbelievable. This goes to show that academic grades do not often reflect or judge the capacities of students. I mean, again, I know students who knew the material better than I have and got worse grades than I did. And I don't believe the grade because I know what my friends, my co-students, peers are capable of doing. So you're out there, you're a student, don't give up if the professor gives you a strange grade that you don't agree with. Don't get discouraged. Grades don't always reflect what you're capable of. And you can always fight with a professor. Well, I don't mean punch him in the face or hurt in the face, but I mean go to the department of the whatever it is that you're studying, the chair, and show the paper, show your other work that you write, and say, listen, I think this professor didn't grade my paper properly. I think I deserve a better grade. And show the evidence of your previous work. And you never know what might happen. You might get the grade overturned or not. They might go and pull the professor's ear and say, listen, you didn't do a good job grading your student's paper. So don't give up. Don't be discouraged if you get a strange grade that you don't approve of. Moreover, there was also the charge that Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech was plagiarized, since there are similar words found in the speech of Pastor Archibald Carey, who gave a speech in 1952 at the Republican National Convention. However, when you look at both speeches, you will see that the words come from not from Carey or Dr. King, but from Samuel Francis Smith, who wrote The Patriotic Hymn America in 1932. Despite all of this image, King remains strong. Despite all these accusations and whatnot, he remains strong. And he's a role model for everyone. And yes, he had his faults, just like everyone else. Even the great biblical heroes at the time, David and Moses, they all had their faults. They make mistakes, but this didn't negate what they did and what God wanted them to do. We're all human beings. We make mistakes. We sin. We do stupid things. But those things shouldn't reflect what we have done in the name of good, in the name of God. And the same with Dr. King. Was he perfect? No, nobody is. But what he did was perfect. And that was bringing attention to the segregation issue and bringing about change in the world. Thank you for listening. God bless and Mary keep. And if this thing works correctly, I would try to put Dr. King's speech.